Hello and welcome to My Consultant, where we bring you the latest Canada immigration updates. We will start this week's episode by disclosing how US is taking inspiration from Canada to help refugees, followed by Canada welcoming highest number of French-speaking newcomers in 2022, and the federal government spending on accommodations for asylum seekers. Next, I will share a path to permanent residency for international students, and Tishina will discuss Canada's next move to help Ukraine. This episode of My Consultant is brought to you by Scotiabank.
Canada remains one of the top global leaders in refugee resettlement and integration, and people have started to notice. The U.S. State Department's new program, called Welcome Corps, aims to give ordinary Americans the opportunity to help resettle refugees. Sound familiar? Playing a key role in its design is Canada's long-standing private sponsorship model. The U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Population, Refugees, and Migration shares that we are grateful to the Government of Canada for sharing details about their program with us as we were designing the Welcome Corps, and appreciate their support in allowing us to learn from their program. Fun fact, in 1979, Canada became the first country to introduce a private sponsorship for refugees. The program has continued to play a significant role in Canada's responses to international refugee crises. The Private Sponsorship of Refugees, or the PSR program, allows Canadians to resettle individuals or families who qualify as refugees under Canada's Refugee and Humanitarian Program. The objective of Welcome Corps is to identify 10,000 U.S. sponsors for roughly 5,000 would-be newcomers this year in what the state and Department of Health and Human Services describe as the boldest innovation in refugee resettlement in 4 decades. The U.S. program will roll out in 2 phases over the course of 2023. The first step will be to match up would-be private sponsors with refugees whose resettlement bids have already been approved under the existing U.S. system. Then, by mid-year, officials expect that private sponsors will be able to hand-pick the refugees they want to refer to the admissions program for resettlement and provide the support to those they have identified once they have been approved.
French-speaking newcomers contribute to the development of the Francophone minority communities and to the diversity of cultural and linguistic aspect of the country. IRCC has recently announced that Canada has welcomed the highest number of Francophone newcomers since 2006. This accomplishment means that newcomers in Canada are making a significant contribution to promoting the French language and addressing the labor shortage in the country. Last year, more than 16,300 newcomers in Canada settled in Francophone minority communities, whereas during the first census year in 2006, French-speaking newcomers outside Quebec were just over 2,800. This represents a major jump of 3.02% between 2006 and 2022.
To help take the pressure and responsibility off of the provinces, the federal government has been actively booking entire hotels to accommodate the influx of asylum seekers entering Canada since the last election. As of September 2021, the Immigration Department has spent just shy of $94 million for long-term leases with hotels, mostly in Quebec, to reserve them for asylum seekers. From the IRCC, by block booking the hotel rooms, the department hopes to provide enough places to house the rising volume of asylum claimants crossing between the ports of entry who have no housing options available to them. A briefing document for the Immigration Department's Deputy Minister on Irregular Migration said that while this option is not cost-effective, it is the only immediate solution in this circumstance. The document also shared that a big rise in airport arrivals, mainly in Montreal June last year, meant that the department had to transfer asylum claimants from Quebec to hotels in Ottawa and Niagara Falls. The department booked 300 hotel rooms in Niagara Falls in July to help Quebec cope. The government has also spent millions reserving entire hotels for asylum seekers who moved to other parts of Canada, including Winnipeg, Lethbridge, Alberta, and Surrey, BC.
If you are coming to Ontario to take a master's degree, then there is a good news for you. The Master's Graduate Stream gives international students with an Ontario's master's degree the opportunity to apply to permanently live and work in Ontario. Ontario's Master's Graduate Stream offers an opportunity to obtain permanent residence for international students who obtained master's degree from an eligible university in Ontario without requiring a job offer or any work experience. In order to be eligible for Master's Graduate Stream, you must meet certain requirements. First and foremost requirement: master's degree from an eligible Ontario university. The degree must have been granted after at least one academic year of full-time study or an equivalent amount in part-time study. Language: you must be able to understand, read, write, and speak in English or French at a Canadian language benchmark, that is CLB level 7 or higher. To prove that you have the mandatory language skills, you must take an approved English or French language test before you submit your application to the stream. Residency in Ontario: you must have legally lived in Ontario at least 1 year in the past 2 years before you apply. Settlement funds: you must have enough funds to support yourself and your family members when you settle in Canada. A family member can be your spouse, common law partner, and children under the age of 22 and their children. Intention to live in Ontario: you must intend to live in Ontario after you have been granted permanent residency. Legal status in Canada: if you are applying from within Canada, you must have legal status at the time you apply and should maintain that status until the time of nomination. Application period: you must submit your application within 2 years of completing the requirements necessary to obtain your master's degree. You must have completed your master's degree before you submit your application. Once candidates receive invitations to apply, they have 14 days to submit their applications. Applications can also be submitted electronically. Applications require extensive personal information and documentation. So please ensure that you are ready whenever you receive your invitation to apply. Generally, an application is processed within 30 and 150 days. If your application is approved, you will be receiving a formal provincial nomination from the province of Ontario. With this provincial nomination, you will be eligible to submit your application to the federal government for your permanent residency. For more information related to the Master's Graduate Stream, you can visit ontario.ca.
As the Russian invasion of Ukraine continues, Canada has now agreed to send 4 of its Leopard 2A4 battle tanks, ammunition, spare parts, and Canadian Armed Forces trainers. Canada's Minister of National Defence made the announcement on January 26 alongside the Chief of the Defence Staff and suggested that the Canadian Forces may increase its contributions in the upcoming months, but contended that sending 4 out of Canada's fleet of 82 battle tanks is more than symbolic, especially as it includes the deployment of Canadian Armed Forces trainers to teach Ukrainian soldiers how to operate the vehicles, ammunition, and spare parts. Defense analyst David Perry, president of the Canadian Global Affairs Institute, said, 4 is a pretty small number, but our army and the armed part of it is much smaller than some of the other contributors. The Canadian government was reluctant to send lethal weapons at the start of the war on February 24, 2022, but the National Defense Minister has defended the new decision, saying the war has changed. The National Defense Minister emphasized that Canada has responded all along to specific requests from Ukraine, saying Ukraine has asked for tanks, and Canada not only is stepping up today with 4 tanks, but is continuing to evaluate what more we can do in the area of tanks and military. The Leopard 2 tanks are the main heavy tanks in Canada's army, and the Chief of Defence Staff explained that several allies in Europe have many hundreds in their inventories, whereas Canada's fleet is relatively small. For a little bit more clarity, Canada has 82 Leopard 2 tanks in 3 different battle and training configurations, and another 30 designed for field support. These tanks are heavily armored and highly protected vehicles, which the military says provides a tactical advantage in the terms of mobility and firepower survivability. They provide direct fire support on the battlefield. The U.S. announced that it would ramp up military support to the Ukraine by pledging M1 Ambram tanks. Poland, the Czech Republic, and other NATO countries have already provided the Ukraine with hundreds of smaller Soviet-made tanks from the Cold War era. Ottawa has pledged $406 million to donate U.S.-made surface-to-air defense missile systems to Ukraine as part of the $500 million the Trudeau government pledged in November for military aid. In total, Canada has contributed about $1 billion in military support and about $5 billion overall, including financial and humanitarian aid. Canada's delivery of the tanks will take place in the coming weeks. That is all for this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Please be sure to click the bell icon to subscribe to the My Consultant YouTube channel and get notified for our latest videos. For more information on topics covered in this week's episode, please visit myconsultant.ca, where you can contact an authorized immigration and citizenship consultant. I'm Tashina Thompson.
I am Tina Batra, and we'll see you next week.